Hi, everyone. I'm Elaine Quijano. It's good to be with you. Thanks for joining us. President Trump is touting his administration's response to the coronavirus pandemic, despite signs that it is getting worse. In a speech to the United Nations General Assembly Tuesday, the president repeatedly blamed China for the outbreak. Then, during a rally in Ohio Monday night, Mr. Trump falsely claimed young people have strong immune systems and, quote, nobody under the age of 18 is severely affected by the virus. The president's comments come as confirmed cases in the U.S. are increasing. Infections are now growing at the fastest rate in 2 months. Early Tuesday, the U.S. reached another somber milestone in the pandemic. Johns Hopkins University reports more than 200,000 people have died from COVID-19 nationwide. Weijia Jiang has the latest.
Late this evening, President Trump made his first remarks about the coronavirus death toll in the U.S. surpassing 200,000.
But it's a horrible thing. Should have never, ever happened.
Earlier, he called his response to the pandemic amazing.
We understand the disease. We understand how to handle it.
But during a rally last night, the president falsely said this about young people getting the virus.
Take your hat off to the young, because they have a hell of an immune system. But it affects virtually nobody. It's an amazing thing.
The WHO warned last month that young people were the primary spreaders of COVID-19.
Due to Donald Trump's lies and incompetence in the past 6 months, have seen one of the gravest losses of American life in history.
Joe Biden also tweeted about the milestone several times, writing, "It didn't have to be this bad." A former advisor to Vice President Mike Pence is under fire for spreading the same message.
The truth is, he doesn't actually care about anyone else but himself.
Olivia Troy, who served on the coronavirus task force, was slammed by her former supervisor, General Keith Kellogg, today.
I fired her. The reason I fired her was her performance had started to drop. I'm the one that escorted her off the compound.
Troy tweeted that Kellogg did not escort her out, and she was asked to stay in her position, adding, "Sad that General Kellogg is telling a bald-faced lie to protect the president."
That was Weijia Jiang reporting. As the Trump administration responds to criticism over its pandemic response, the White House seems to be focusing on what appears to be the president's main priority. The president says he wants to fill the vacant seat on the Supreme Court by Election Day. It now looks like he has the votes to do it. The Senate would need a majority to move forward. Two of the last Republican holdouts, Senators Mitt Romney and Cory Gardner, now say they support holding a vote on President Trump's eventual nominee. Nancy Cortez is on Capitol Hill with the latest.
The GOP drumbeat to act fast grew louder today.
I hope it happens before the election.
There's really no reason to wait.
Election Day is now 42 days away, exactly the amount of time it took for Ginsburg herself to get confirmed.
We have an obligation under the Constitution.
Senate Leader Mitch McConnell didn't commit to a timeline today. He led the charge to block President Obama's nominee 8 months before an election.
Do you understand why many Americans view this as a double standard?
I can only repeat that we have an obligation under the Constitution, should we choose to take advantage of it.
Democrats registered their fury by holding up Senate business this afternoon.
I'm not going to put a rubber stamp on this process. It's awful.
I mean, this is treachery. This is deceitful.
There is little they can do to prevent a vote unless 4 Republicans side with them. And today, Utah's Mitt Romney announced he wants to move ahead.
My liberal friends have, over many decades, gotten very used to the idea of having a liberal court. And that's not written in the stars.
That leaves just 2 GOP holdouts, including Alaska's Lisa Murkowski.
So are your Republican colleagues in the wrong?
I'm not going to be critical of my Republican colleagues or critical of anyone. I have been asked how I feel about where we are just weeks before the presidential election. And those are my words. I will stand by them.
Nancy Cortez and Weijia Jiang join me now. Nancy is CBS News chief congressional correspondent, and Weijia is a CBS News White House correspondent. Hi, Nancy and Weijia. So how fast are Republicans planning to move, Nancy, once the president announces his nominee? Is there anything that could slow the process down?
Well, that's what they're debating right now, Elaine, whether to try to move at warp speed and go through the entire process, hold a confirmation vote before the November elections, or wait until just afterwards during the lame duck. There are pros and cons to both. When we talk to senators, some fall into one camp, some into the others, but the ones who want to move quickly are the most vocal. They argue that the longer this drags out, the likelier it is that they'll hit some kind of a snag, and that any political price that they pay for taking this difficult vote before an election won't really matter, because it'll kind of be baked into the cake. Voters will know that it's about to happen if it happens afterwards. So that's the discussion that's taking place right now. As far as whether there's anything that Democrats could do to slow it down, not really. They can drag things out by a couple of days here or there, but really gumming up the works, that's something that's going to be difficult for them to do. They just don't have the procedural tools at their disposal to do so.
Well, Weijia, the president's list has 5 women on it. There are top contenders, federal judges Amy Coney Barrett and Barbara Lagoa. What more do we know about them, and how do they square with the president's agenda?
Well, these two women have a lot in common. They are both conservative. They are federal appeals court judges. They are both mothers. In fact, Judge Amy Coney Barrett has 7 children. Judge Lagoa has 3 children. But their backstories are very different. And perhaps what makes them different as well is the sort of support they could get from a bipartisan group of lawmakers. We know already that Lagoa was able to have bipartisan support when she was confirmed as a judge. She also has a very, interesting backstory as a first-generation Cuban American from the state of Florida who could help the president shore up that critical support in such a key battleground state. Judge Barrett, on the other hand, she has gained favoritism from conservative religious groups because of her very public views on abortion. And so that is one main reason why, they are pushing for President Trump to choose her over Lagoa. But certainly, they both offer a lot of the things that the president is looking for when it comes to achieving that more conservative agenda, which he ran on in 2016 and continues to do so for the upcoming election.
Well, Weijia, you mentioned Judge Amy Coney Barrett and her views on abortion. How does that fit in to the broader political calculation? Let's say she's selected. How would that fit into the broader political calculation by the president and Republicans?
So in 2018, the president responded to this when he was choosing his second Supreme Court nominee. And he said, I actually have it right here. He said, oh, excuse me, we also have some mosquitoes out tonight. But he said, if we put in another 2 or perhaps 3 justices on, that's really what it's going to be. That will happen, and that will happen automatically, in my opinion, because I am putting pro-life justices on the court. That was in response to a question about whether he wants to see the court overturn Roe v. Wade. And so, whether the president really feels that this is at the top of his agenda or not, he knows that this will garner a lot of support again from those conservative religious groups that I mentioned, because, no matter how you look at this, this is a political calculation as well, especially because we are so close to the election. And so, yes, both he and the vice president have said that this is something that is important to them, but we have to remember not to put all the focus on that, because certainly there are other issues that are important to the president and the administration, and he will keep that in mind, not just this focus on anti-abortion.
I do want to follow up, though. During an interview with CBS Evening News anchor and managing editor Norah O'Donnell, Vice President Mike Pence said it was the administration's goal to, quote, appoint pro-life jurists to our federal courts at every level. So, Weijia, where does that leave some vulnerable Republican senators like, for instance, Susan Collins of Maine?
So
So this is a tough issue because, you know, again, you mentioned that she is a moderate Republican, and she is one of the few that we've heard say that she would actually not be in support of a vote for this very reason, because she has to calculate her own political future as well. But at the end of the day, I think the White House is making the argument that it is a win-win for Republicans if they are able to point to this record of, you know, having 3 nominees on the Supreme Court, and it's something that they'll be able to, you know, use in their pocket. But that might not be the case for senators who are in states that have voters who do not lean so far right.
Yeah. Nancy, on another topic, the government is set to run out of funding next Wednesday. What is the latest on negotiations to avoid a shutdown, and does the Supreme Court battle factor into that at all?
It does, Elaine. There's a lot of bad feeling around here right now. And so a process that had appeared to be all but buttoned up, funding the government, has now hit a major snag. House Democrats unveiled their spending bill, and it does not include one key piece that's very important to Republicans: aid to farmers who have been hurt by President Trump's trade policies. Republicans felt that that is something that had already been agreed to by Democrats, but Democrats clearly trying to take advantage of a very tense situation here and saying that they don't think that Congress should have to clean up for the president's policies. So they took it out. They also, as a concession, took out $2 billion in food aid that they thought was important for children who have been going without food to eat during this pandemic from time to time. And so they want to move ahead with this bill and hold a vote. Republicans now warning that if they do that, they'll just add the trade aid for farmers back in when it gets to the Senate. And they're also arguing that this is bad politics for Democrats on the eve of a big election, because they think that it's going to hurt them in big farm states. So this is a spat that is playing out, and at a very inopportune time, because as you pointed out, funding is supposed to run out in the middle of next week. And this bill, by the way, only lasts for a couple of months. It only funds the government through mid-December. So they'll be having this fight all over again. If they get out of the current morass, they'll be having the fight again just after the presidential election, when people will be in even worse moods around here.
I imagine so. Nancy, what about coronavirus relief legislation? Is there a sense of urgency among lawmakers at all to pass something before the election?
There really isn't, Elaine. We've almost seen that entirely fall off of the radar screen, particularly in the Republican-controlled Senate, where now it is obviously all about this huge Supreme Court battle. Whether or not they hold a vote on the president's nominee right before the election or right after it, that debate is going to dominate the conversation in the Senate right through Election Day. And so while Democrats in the House haven't given up on the much larger coronavirus relief package that they've proposed, there simply isn't an appetite among Republicans in the Senate right now to do anything about it. They think that it would just take up time that they could be spending working on this nomination.
All right. Nancy Cordes and Weijia Jiang, really great to talk to you both. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks.